I wanted to be able to provide a different perspective for people that may be curious as to what happened, who were there but didn't see it from this vantage point, who weren't there and just heard about what happened in very minor detail. I'm hopeful that the telling of this story here doesn't cause any emotional distress for anyone. That's certainly not my intention at all. And I think if you think hearing about it may be triggering in any capacity, I want to encourage you that you do not have to watch this video. I'm not entirely sure where to begin, but I will start by saying that the intention of this video is completely in honor of Lazar Ðukić and meant to be a tribute to him, his life, and in the utmost respect for his family in an incredible difficult situation. Last week at the 2024 CrossFit Games, we lost a friend, a fellow competitor, a boyfriend, a brother, a son, in Lazar Ðukić during the first event. It was the hardest CrossFit Games I've ever been a part of from an emotional standpoint. It, even looking back now, doesn't really feel real. I wish that it wasn't. I'm very conscious of the fact that in having this conversation, there are a lot of emotions and opinions, and there are investigations, and I want to be able to speak my heart and the way that I feel and give the perspective of the athletes. I may not be able to speak for everybody, but from the perspective of an athlete that was there. And I also just want to be sensitive to the situation and everything that's tied to it. So I apologize ahead of time if anything that I say ends up offending anyone. I've had the pleasure of knowing Lazar for the last 4 years now. I shared this story already, but I first met he and his brother Luca at the CrossFit Games in 2021. Joanne and I were lucky enough to give them a ride to the venue from the hotel one morning, and that was our introduction to them. And immediately I knew that he was somebody that I connected with, somebody that I could see being a friend. And the more that we interacted, the more that I knew I really, really liked him and just enjoyed being in his presence, having conversations with him. I have said to people more recently that he became one of my favorite male CrossFit Games competitors. And I know that that sentiment was shared by a lot of other of our fellow competitors, and I'm not surprised by that just because of how incredibly kind and full of joy and playfulness he was. Which for me means that the last time we interacted was in Madrid, Spain for the Madrid CrossFit Championships, which he won, and the team that I was on participated in, and we had a really fun time there together and celebrating afterwards. And I'll always remember that and all the other positive interactions that I had with him, as will, I think, everybody else that knew him. The competition was set to start on Thursday morning. It was in Fort Worth, Texas, which is known to be quite hot during the summer. The event organizers had it slated to start early to try to mitigate some of the heat and the factors that could play in athlete safety. But even at 7 a.m. when the individuals started, it was quite warm. I was warming up and watched the athletes take off on the run. And towards the end of my warm-up, before we headed over to the start line, a few of the individuals had crossed the finish line. And just a point of note that didn't feel significant in the moment, but kind of is interesting now, one of my good friends, Travis Mayer, had finished. And as I was walking over to the start line, I gave him a hug and said, "Wow, your body is on fire, like super warm." And he said, "Yeah, the water was really, really hot." And in the moment, I didn't think anything of that. But we now know that for whatever reason, after a 3.5 mile run and almost 800 meters into the swim, at some point, Lazar started to struggle. I think that was clear on the live feed. I think that was clear to a lot of the spectators that were there. Apparently, he went from swimming freestyle to swimming breaststroke. He's a very proficient swimmer. He and I connected in the past over both having been water polo players. And thus far, I've chosen not to watch the feed, and I don't know if I ever will, because I don't know if I want that image in my mind. But it was said that at a certain point he went underwater, and it was about 50 meters from the finish line, and he never came back up. While we were waiting at the start line, 5 to 10 minutes had passed from when we were supposed to have started, and we were notified that there was going to be a delay, but without any information, word had started to travel through the team athletes, kind of whispers that somebody was missing. And then eventually it was said that Lazar hadn't yet crossed the finish line, or something was going on with his time chip. We didn't really know, but as of right now, he hadn't been accounted for. This is 8:15, 15 minutes after the teams were supposed to have started the event, and an hour and 15 minutes after the individuals had started. At that point, it probably would have been about 45 minutes since he should have crossed the finish line. I've been at events before where someone on a run course or a swim course has been unaccounted for because a time chip fell off, or something happened where they started and went back to the starting line and never crossed the finish line, but were always okay. And so I was hopeful that that was also the case. And in fact, when they told the teams to go back to the warm-up area, that there was going to be a further delay, somebody had come over and said they found him, everything's okay, which was a relief. But as we walked back over towards the warm-up area, which was behind the starting line, I ran into my friend and guy who does my media with a friend of and media person for Lazar, and they both had incredibly distraught looks on their faces. Both of their eyes were red and full of tears. And I was confused because I had just been told that everything was okay. And when I walked over to them, I gave them like a questioning thumbs up. And Alex shook his head and said they can't find him. And I said, wait, they just told me that everything was okay. And he said, no, as of right now, he hasn't been found. And that kind of brought back this emotion of confusion and panic and grief. And my immediate instinct was to find my wife. I know that she is always worried when I'm taking the competition floor about my safety and the safety of all of our friends and fellow competitors. And I don't know, I just wanted to, because there was so much different information being shared, I wanted to connect with her, let her know what I knew, comfort her a little bit. So I found Joanne, told her what was going on, and said, I'm going to go see if there's anything that I can do to help and get more information. So I went back towards the starting line, and again, I want to be sensitive to everybody in the situation, so perhaps this doesn't make it into the video, but Luca was pacing around the starting line, and in the moment I didn't really know what was appropriate. When people are in those situations, I don't know if they want to be bothered, touched, comforted, talked to. So I kind of just walked up and put a hand on his shoulder and didn't say anything. And he was in disbelief. He was just saying over and over again, there's no way, there's no way. He's such a good swimmer. We just did this course earlier this week. There's no way. I asked him if there was anything that I could do for him. And he asked if I could check on Lazar's girlfriend, Anya, who was sitting right behind us. And similarly, I think at that point, nobody knew what to believe or feel. More medical personnel were starting to show up, getting in the water, diving, searching. Confirmation of any kind was going to bring some sort of clarity and understanding to the situation. As soon as we got in the car, I knew that it didn't feel right for me to go. I don't know why. I had already asked if there was anything that could be done to help and was turned away, but it just felt like I needed to be there for some reason. It just felt wrong not to be. So I dropped the team off of the Airbnb, and Joanne and I turned back around and went back to the lake. And we're there for another couple hours until it was confirmed. And at that time, I had gone to sit at a picnic table right by the water, and I'm not sure what drove me to do this, but instinctually I opened my phone and looked back at some of the photos that I knew that I had with Lazar. And I think for whatever reason, seeing a picture of he and I and Anya together smiling from the year before, that made it real to me. That hit me, that this person that I cared for, that so many people cared for and loved, that was so happy and kind and generous, had just been taken away. And for the first time in a long time, I just sobbed with my head down on the table. And looking up and looking around, there were a lot of people experiencing similar emotions, I think, just full of grief, confusion. We went back to our Airbnb, and none of us had any idea what to do. All the athletes got an email from CrossFit a couple hours later saying that there would be a meeting for the athletes at 4 p.m. that day to discuss the events of the morning and figure out the plan moving forward, which I don't even know if was something that had been considered yet by myself and some of the other athletes. We had gone out to Texas for the week to compete at the CrossFit Games, and the very first event, it felt like the whole thing just crumbled, and it was hard to imagine the fact that there would still be a CrossFit Games. It was the strangest environment that I think I've ever been a part of. When we got to the athlete meeting, there were 200 athletes and coaches sitting on the finish line, and probably 20 of CrossFit staff off to the side waiting for everybody to file in. And I don't want to name any names, so just generally speaking, somebody from CrossFit came out, addressed the athletes, apologized, and expressed their sadness for the events that had occurred in the morning, and said that they had spoken to the family, and with all the information that they had thus far, they were making the decision for the games to continue, that they would pick back up the next day at 9 a.m., and that athletes would be briefed on the next day's events in the next few hours and to stick around. And they started to walk off. And all of the athletes were silent for a minute. Again, just confused and kind of shocked that we had gotten the message that we had gotten and it had been delivered in the way that it had, until somebody finally did decide to stand up and ask a question and present an objection. And from that point, the discussions picked up. A lot of the other athletes started voicing how they were feeling, their confusion. It was clear that everybody was rocked by the fact that one of our friends, one of the athletes, had been taken away from us, from the world that morning. And I'm sure that some people had strong opinions, but it seemed to me, I got the sense that everybody just felt conflicted. The people that were there competing at the CrossFit Games for the very first time wanted to have the opportunity to see that through, even in light of what had happened. Some people that were there to defend their title as the fittest man or woman on earth were so upset about everything that they were considering giving up their chance to defend and step away from the competition. And there was every emotion in between. Some people thought that we could continue if it was done in the right way, if everything about the rest of the weekend was done in honor of the Ðukić family and as a tribute to Lazar. Some athletes wanted it to not be a competition anymore, but an exhibition and a coming together of the community to honor him. Some athletes thought that the prize money should be removed from the equation and that it should be split evenly across all athletes to cover travel and any expenses that people had spent to get out there. Some people wanted the whole thing canceled altogether so that the community could mourn. There was an option given that Friday be purely a tributary day to give the community, the athletes, time to process and mourn, although it probably still wouldn't have been enough time to then pick up the competition Saturday, Sunday. That was an option that was presented. At the end of it, nobody really came to a consensus, and a few hours later, we received an email that said that the games are going to continue tomorrow. After a tribute at 10 a.m., the teams would begin at 11 a.m. I went back to the house with the rest of my team, and we had a couple hours of discussions, sharing emotions with each other, going over options, talking about what we wanted to do, what we thought felt right, which in the moment, nothing felt right. No option for us at least felt like the right thing to do. Continuing the competition felt wrong in the sense that it almost felt like we would then be kind of ignoring the fact that something as significant had happened. Not continuing the competition also felt like there were different reasons why that wasn't the right decision to make. Was it an opportunity for us to continue talking about Lazar and honoring him throughout the weekend on the platform that we would have access to? By dropping out of the competition, wouldn't have had the opportunity to make any prize money, which was something that we had decided that we would want to donate to Lazar's family in figuring out how to move forward in this situation. So that was a factor in our decision making. Physically, emotionally, we were all a mess and knew that we were not in any condition to go out and perform the way that we had intended to before the weekend had started, which I almost feel guilty saying was a factor, but it was a consideration. Before we went to bed, the decision that we made as a team was that we would show up the next day with all of our gear, and the decision on whether or not we would be based on how the opening ceremony made us feel. If we felt good after it and felt like the competition was going to proceed in a way that was respectful, then we would do it. And if it did not, everybody on our team said we were okay with all four of us, or even just one of us, saying they did not feel comfortable going on. We get to the venue the next morning, and all of the athletes are filtering in for the opening ceremony, which was meant to honor Lazar. And I think most people that were there for it would agree that the tribute was unfortunately underwhelming. That's all I'll say about that. But after 2 minutes of standing on the floor with a picture of Lazar above us and a message being read, we were asked to leave the floor and go straight to the warm-up area to get ready for the first event. Again, just to provide people with perspective that don't have access to the warm-up area, when we got back there, it felt like it was right back to the discussions that we were having the night before. All of the athletes had kind of formed multiple conversation groups and were going back and forth on what do we do. In theory, the decision had been made, but it just still felt so wrong that nobody knew how to approach it, how to start. That was, for me, that was a big issue, starting the competition with the tribute that had been made being the only thing to differentiate it from any other year of the CrossFit Games felt disrespectful and wrong for me to do. There was still discussion of people stepping out for the rest of the weekend. Athletes that hadn't yet done so were deciding to in that moment. I personally was pushing for more time. It just felt like right now in this very moment, I don't feel right stepping onto the competition floor. It doesn't feel right for me. I don't think it would feel right for Lazar's family to witness. It's just nothing about it felt right in the moment. I asked if there was any room for the competition to be postponed, whether by hours or the rest of the day, to give everybody that was still in this place of feeling torn more time to process and make decisions. And it just at that point wasn't an option. That was what was communicated to myself and us as athletes, that the show is going on and we understand if you're not comfortable participating as an athlete, and you have every right to remove yourself from the competition, but the competition will proceed with or without you, essentially. I really did not know what to do and was so wrapped up in those conversations and trying to advocate for more time for the athletes that by the time I looked down at my watch and the final heat of teams that we were in was going to be called in 7 minutes from the time I looked at my watch, and I had not done a single exercise, I still had my sweatshirt and sweatpants on, I kind of panicked in the moment and found my team and I said, hey, are we doing this or are we not? If we are doing it, what can we do to honor Lazar and the Ðukić family? And we decided we would try. If at any point it felt wrong for anybody, we would stop, we could leave. I think for me to be able to proceed, and something that I shared with my team was, if we're going to do this, let's try our best to, when we take the floor, do the best that we can in the ways that we've prepared to. I know it's going to be hard emotionally. We know it's going to be hard physically. Let's be athletes for the 10-minute time cap. And as soon as that's over, zoom back out, feel all the feelings, respond, react, do whatever you need to do. But while we're on the floor, let's try as much as we can to be the athletes that instinctually we are and that we had gone there to be. I think what was comforting for a lot of athletes to at least tell themselves was that Lazar was an extremely competitive athlete. He loved to go hard. He loved to win. When the clock started, he was doing everything that he could to perform at the best of his ability. And so I think that was a way that some athletes were able to justify competing, was that they were honoring him by doing what he loved to do. And I think that was part of the decision that we had made as well. We also wanted to have the opportunity, as much as we could throughout the rest of the weekend, to say his name, to represent him and his family. And logically, for me, the better that we did, the more of an opportunity we would have to do that. And I think that the confirmation of that was when we won a workout on that day. That was the only opportunity that we had had to speak to the community and I think try to connect with everyone, have them understand to a degree how we were feeling, how sad we were, how torn we were to be out there.
I've been experiencing, I think, a very similar roller coaster of emotions for the last few days. It comes in waves, it bubbles up, and there's a lot of sadness. It almost is, I feel a little guilty celebrating and treating this like a normal competition, because we all know that it's different than any other competition that we've ever participated in, but I don't know, we're just doing the best we can. We're thinking about Lazar and the Ðukić family and everything that we do, and we appreciate you guys staying here with us. We made the choice to stay, you guys made the choice to stay with us, and as a community, we can all help together.
And just to reiterate, every single time that we took the floor, which I think for the teams ended up being 7 events over the course of 3 days, every single time it felt wrong. every single time that we crossed the finish line, all of the emotions flooded back. The sadness was there. The absence of Lazar was felt so deeply. And that never went away. I think from the outside looking in, it seemed really strange that the competition continued. And I think without that perspective, it's hard to understand why or how. And I don't even know if getting that perspective changes things for anybody. But speaking on behalf of at least some of the athletes, I know it was a really hard decision to make, and it was a decision that was made very much with Lazar and the Ðukić family in our hearts and in our minds. It's been a few days since the games have ended, and right now it feels like we're in this in-between period where there's a lull of, we don't know what the future holds. We don't know what happened in the past. There's still a lot of questions. I want to be a part of the rebuilding process. I don't know what that looks like. I do know that CrossFit is a methodology and has become a sport that has changed my life and the lives of many others. I want that to exist for people in a positive way in some capacity. I want to push for a future of the sport where athletes like myself that started doing it 15 years ago can have a bright and beautiful future. I think changes have to be made in order for that to happen, and I'm devastated that there is an athlete that doesn't get to have any more of a future because of the way things unfolded. There's no, I feel like usually I like my videos and my content and my message to have a positive impact and spread joy and hope. And I really right now don't feel like there is a way to do that in this moment. I know eventually that I am going to be encouraged when it feels right to live like Lazar. I know that every single time I saw him, he had a giant smile on his face. That's inspiring to me. I know that he had conversations with everybody from the most elite athletes to staff at the venue that had nothing to do with the games. That's inspiring to me. I know that he loved big. I know that he loved Anya. That's inspiring to me. I know that he loved his brother. I know that he loved his parents. That's inspiring to me. I think if you were looking for a playbook on how to live life as a good human, look no further than trying to live like Lazar.